Coming up on a newscast, the U.S. FDA authorizes a second booster dose for people 50 and up, as well as select immunocompromised individuals, with South Korea mulling similar measures. Meanwhile, coronavirus infections in Asia surpassed 100 million. South Korea successfully test-fires its solid-fuel space rocket, a big step forward in strengthening defense power with Pyongyang launching an ICBM. Russia continues attacks in Ukraine even after the latest round of talks. Meanwhile, Moscow's top diplomat visits China for talks on the Ukraine situation. Hello and welcome. I'm Daniel Che here to bring the latest. Let's begin with our top story. South Korea saw over 400,000 new COVID-19 infections on Wednesday. Although the country is seeing a gradual decline, authorities remain on alert as severe cases hit an all-time high. Still, the government is set to announce new distancing rules, possibly easing current restrictions. Choi Min-jung starts us off.
South Korea on Wednesday confirmed 424,641 new cases of COVID-19. It's a jump of 77,000 cases from the previous day, but cases dropped by 66,000 on week. The number of patients in critical condition hit an all-time high of 1,301. The country also posted its second highest number of deaths at 432. Despite infections declining slowly, authorities underlined that the country must remain vigilant.
People are letting their guards down, knowing that the Omicron variant has a low fatality rate. However, if you look at the figures, deaths are currently concentrated among the elderly. Taking this into account, Omicron still poses a grave threat.
Kim, however, also gave reassurances that Korea's fatality rate is much lower than countries with a similar number of cases, thanks to the public's efforts. Officials also said that the number of severely ill patients is lower than the initial forecast of up to 2,000. Thanks to oral pills and Omicron's comparatively mild effects, officials have downgraded their projection, saying severe cases will reach a maximum of 1,700. Meanwhile, starting Wednesday, local clinics and hospitals can treat COVID-19 patients face-to-face, increasing access to medical facilities for those infected. People can now see doctors after making a reservation, even if they are under quarantine. Beginning Thursday, children aged 5 to 11 will be able to get vaccinated against COVID-19. Around 1,200 medical centers nationwide will be providing Pfizer shots for young children. Health authorities are strongly advising that children at high risk, including those who are obese or have weakened immune systems, get inoculated. Authorities are also considering relaxing current social distancing rules, with revisions to be announced on Friday. The changes are likely to include expanding the social gathering cap to 10 people from the current 8 and extending business hours to midnight. The revisions are set to be implemented next week. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
The U.S. FDA authorized a second COVID-19 booster shot for people 50 and older. It's for those in the age group who got their last shot at least 4 months ago. They can get either the vaccine from Pfizer or Moderna. The FDA also gave the go-ahead for a fifth shot for people who are more vulnerable, like the immunocompromised. The latest approval comes after officials said nearly 55% of new cases last week were stealth Omicron. Meanwhile, South Korean authorities are mulling allowing a second booster for the immunocompromised and senior citizens. The nation has been giving second boosters to patients and staff in nursing homes as well as mental health centers since mid-February. Even after being released from quarantine, many still suffer from post-COVID conditions like dry coughs and fatigue. Research shows such symptoms can last for weeks, if not longer. Min Soo-kyun explains further.
Quite a few people who've suffered from COVID-19 still experience symptoms even after their release from isolation. Like this man who tested positive last week and is now out of quarantine.
My quarantine is over, but I still have a tickle in my throat, and it's been like that since I got confirmed. I do cough, but it doesn't hurt. It's just that my throat is itchy.
This condition, known as long COVID or post-COVID-19 syndrome, can last for weeks or months. In fact, research shows that most patients will fully recover within 12 weeks, but for some, it may last as long as a year. The most common symptoms appear to be cough, fatigue, chest pain, brain fog, dizziness, and a loss or distortion of smell or taste.
Every day, there are about 10 or more people who come to the hospital with persistent coughs and phlegm, and this is because of inflammation, such as bronchitis and laryngitis, that remain after we're infected with COVID-19.
Developing long-term symptoms, however, does not seem to be necessarily linked to how ill a patient was with COVID-19. British health authorities have said that people who had mild symptoms at first can have long-term problems as well. Similar findings have also been reported in the US. While children have been thought to be less vulnerable to the long-term effects of COVID-19, more are now being diagnosed with long COVID. Since anyone can fall victim to post-COVID conditions, here are some tips to ease the symptoms.
We would have to avoid excessive exercise or activities that may interfere with recovery and avoid beverages like coffee and alcohol. Also, if the symptoms can be eased with medication or treatment, prescription medicine can help.
More than 20% of South Korea's population has now been infected with the virus. The Korea Disease Control and Prevention Agency says it soon plans to carry out research on post-COVID conditions, as this could remain a concerning health issue even after the pandemic is over. Min Suk-hyun, Arirang News.
The President-elect's Transition Committee asked authorities to lift various COVID-19 measures once there's a clear sign of a decline in cases. An Ja-soo, who heads the team, expects further easing of restrictions, which could include complete abolition of operation hours restrictions. Lee Yoon shares with us his remarks.
President-elect Yoon Suk-yeol has been clear that pandemic policy should be based on science, not public sentiment. And the chair of Yoon's Transition Committee, An Ja-soo, has announced two plans that have the support of the health authorities. First, establishing a platform that uses big data to analyze the number of people infected with COVID-19 and the side effects of the vaccines. And the other, conducting a mass antibody test on 10,000 people to gauge just how far the virus has spread, which will help account for unreported cases.
The people can trust the government's virus prevention policies when related data are thoroughly analyzed and shared with them transparently.
An also said the distancing rules should be guided by science, and while he supports the easing of restrictions, he thinks it happened too soon before the Omicron wave passed its peak.
The committee has asked the health ministry to start easing the restrictions gradually when a clear sign of a downward trend is detected. We are waiting for their answer.
And once the sign is detected, which should be soon, he says, a total lifting of restrictions could begin with those on business hours.
I am told that the committee has asked about the possibility of completely abolishing the business hour restrictions, which have been found to have little effect on virus prevention.
In addition to scientific virus prevention, one of the committee's other key tasks in its COVID-19 response is the economy, in particular reasonable compensation for businesses. And An said he is considering a mix of various options, including cash payouts, loans, and tax benefits. That is to reduce the potential rise in inflation that cash can cause and to maintain the government's financial soundness. And as the first step toward that, the committee says it will scientifically assess the scale of the damage and make sure nobody is left out. Lee Kyung-eun, Arirang News.
President-elect Yoon met with the Catholic Archbishop of Seoul and discussed the importance of social integration as well as overcoming social conflict and division. Peter Jang-sun-taek expressed hopes the incoming government will work to help the marginalized. During the election campaign, Yoon pledged to visit the Archbishop at Myeongdong Cathedral and volunteer at the soup kitchen. He delivered on the promises. The president-elect plans to visit the Archbishop again after inauguration. Yoon also held a phone with the Dutch Prime Minister and discussed cooperation on semiconductors as well as North Korea's ICBM test. Mark Rutte invited him to the Netherlands. South Korea successfully test-fired a solid-fuel space rocket for the first time. This breakthrough is looked to help strengthen defense power at a critical time when Pyongyang has violated its own moratorium by launching an ICBM. Bae Eun-ji has the full story.
A rocket blasts off into space at a testing site in Taean, located on the west coast of South Korea. On Wednesday, the country successfully test-fired its solid-fuel space rocket for the first time. This comes 8 months after successfully conducting the combustion test of a solid-propelled engine in July last year. South Korean researchers were able to speed up the development of the solid-fuel rocket after the country and the U.S. agreed in May last year to end restrictions on Seoul's ballistic missile and rocket development. The country's defense ministry said after going through additional tests, the homegrown rocket will be launched carrying an actual satellite. Eventually, it'll be used to put a small satellite or a number of ultra-small satellites into orbit. Wednesday's test verified the rocket's key technologies, including large solid-fuel engine, fairing separation, and stage separation, and was observed by the nation's defense minister, Seok. Also, the test comes less than a week after North Korea managed to conduct its ICBM launch last Thursday, scrapping its self-imposed moratorium. In reference to the North's recent move, the defense ministry said Seoul's successful test launch is an important milestone in gaining power.
At a critical time with North Korea's recent launch of an ICBM, the successful test launch of the solid-fuel space rocket is an important milestone in strengthening our military's defense power of space-based surveillance and in the reconnaissance field.
This is not the first time that South Korea tested a domestically built rocket. In October 2021, South Korea conducted a test launch of its liquid-fueled rocket called Duri. Although Duri failed to fully place a dummy satellite into orbit after liftoff, it marked a meaningful step in the country's space development. Unlike Duri, a solid-fuel rocket like the one tested on Wednesday is simpler and less expensive to develop and manufacture. It can also be launched faster than a liquid-fuel rocket. 배은지, Arirang News.
Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said the latest round of Russia-Ukraine peace talks produced no breakthroughs. Following the meeting, Moscow promised to drastically reduce military operations in two cities, but reportedly there are a few signs of concrete steps towards peace being taken. Kim Yoon is standing by on the line with the latest. Yoon, first of all, tell us about the peace talks.
Well, Daniel, let me take you back to Tuesday morning. Russian and Ukrainian negotiators sat down in Istanbul, Turkey that morning to hold the first face-to-face peace talks in weeks. The talks moved along quickly, ending in less than 4 hours. The two sides touched upon many subjects, including the fate of the eastern Donbas region and Crimea. The meeting ended with Russia's pledge to power down some of its offensive in Ukraine's capital, Kyiv, and the northern city of Chernihiv. Ukraine also offered neutrality and the prospect of giving up on joining NATO in exchange for security guarantees. Russia's lead negotiator on Tuesday said that the latest round of meetings were constructive, while the Ukrainian delegation said that they have laid out a possible framework for peace. But Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov on Wednesday said there were no breakthroughs during the meetings, but he did welcome that Ukraine has written down its demands.
The big question now is Russia taking actual steps to reduce military action, and how are other nations responding to the latest developments?
Well, following the announcement, the Pentagon said on Tuesday that it thinks that some Russian military units have left Kyiv, but in very small numbers. Pentagon spokesperson John Kirby also said that he thinks Moscow is just repositioning its troops and not actually withdrawing them. He remained cautious to the threat posed to Kyiv and also said that airstrikes in the city are continuing. Officials in Ukraine report Russian forces bombarding areas near Kyiv and in Chernihiv. A senior Ukrainian official also says that there were no areas without sirens all night in Ukraine. Other officials are also skeptical of Moscow's pledge.
Ukrainians are not naive people. Ukrainians have already learned, both during these 34 days of invasion and over the past 8 years of the war in Donbas, that only a concrete result can be trusted.
I've not seen anything that suggests that this is moving forward in an effective way, because Russia, at least we've not seen signs of real seriousness.
U.S. President Joe Biden said that he won't believe it until he sees it. The U.K. also said that it will judge actions and not words.
Well, Western Ukrainian officials are very much opposed to Russia's invasion and urging further action to achieve peace, but there are other points of view on the situation, right?
Yes, well, foreign ministers of China and Russia met on Wednesday in the eastern Chinese province of Anhui and exchanged their views on the situation in Ukraine. Following the meeting, the Russian foreign ministry said in a statement that the ministers both condemned Western sanctions imposed on Moscow. They call them illegal and counterproductive. Russia's foreign minister Lavrov will travel to New Delhi on Thursday for a two-day trip to meet with senior officials there. India remains the only country that hasn't condemned Russia's invasion of Ukraine in the U.S.-led Quad alliance, which includes Japan, Australia, the U.S., as well as India. India also abstained from voting against Russia for the UN resolution, but its permanent representative to the UN ambassador said during a Security Council briefing that India remains deeply concerned by the ongoing situation. So all eyes are on India on what they're going to say in the latest talks. Back to you, Daniel.
All right, Yoon, thank you for those updates. Russia's invasion of Ukraine is causing the fastest growing refugee crisis in Europe since World War II. Reportedly, more than 10 million people, a quarter of Ukraine's population, have been displaced. Amid the chaos, South Korea has been working to get its citizens to safety. Yoon has the latest.
Since the Russian invasion of Ukraine, some 4 million people have fled the country, many risking their lives amid airstrikes and bombardments. And South Korea has been working to get its citizens out of danger. The Foreign Ministry sent out travel restriction warnings and ordered the swift evacuation of some 300 Koreans in the region even before the war broke out on February 24th. Thanks to that, Woo Tae-gyu was one of the hundreds who were able to fly out of the country.
On February 13th, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs issued an emergency travel restriction for all regions of Ukraine. They made a group chat with all the Korean residents to exchange information and their whereabouts. At the time, I didn't think a war would actually break out, so I flew out to Kazakhstan, hoping to return to Ukraine in a few months' time. Weeks passed, and the situation got worse, so I had to fly to Korea.
But he said his heart goes out to those still trying to flee the country.
I can't believe innocent civilians are dying even at this moment. Though I was fortunate enough to leave before the war started, I feel a bit guilty for leaving many of my friends who are yet to escape for their lives.
To help those who couldn't leave the country before all air travel from Ukraine was cut off, Korean embassies like the one in Poland were ready at the border.
We closely communicated with the Korean embassy in Ukraine, which would let us know how many people were planning to cross the border at what time. We would then wait for them at the border around the clock. Some would use their own cars, or some used vehicles provided by the embassy. Fortunately, we were able to transport each and every resident safely, despite the unstable internet connection, which sometimes made communication difficult.
The Foreign Ministry says that as of March 30th, only 25 Koreans remain in Ukraine. Most of them have expressed their desire to stay in the country as they don't want to leave their Ukrainian partners. There are also still some Koreans in neighboring countries like Russia who want to come back home. Even at this moment, South Korea's Foreign Ministry and embassies in Eastern Europe are trying their best to accomplish their main mission, helping overseas residents get to safety. Yoon, Arirang News.
It's spring planting season in Ukraine, but farmers can't carry out their tasks as most are on the front lines or looking after families and neighbors due to Russia's attacks. This has raised concerns of global food shortage as the two countries are key grain suppliers. Kim Sung-min provides a deeper analysis.
The world's breadbasket is at war. With Russia's invasion, Ukrainian farms are about to miss the critical planting season for spring crops like corn, barley, and sunflower seeds. As of last week, the country has only sown 150,000 hectares out of last year's 15 million, with 99% of the fields still laying empty. And it's assumed that just 7 million hectares, half the normal amount, will be sown this spring, leading to a much smaller harvest. Not only Ukraine, but the world will have to pay the cost as both Russia and Ukraine contribute significantly to the world's essential food exports. The two countries together account for around a quarter of global grain exports. They supply 30% of global wheat exports, almost 12% of corn, and more than 80% of the world's sunflower oil.
But if we don't have a proper planting season, there's going to be maybe a reduction of 5 to 10% of world supply in the fall. That's going to create food crisis.
Prices of key crops like wheat, barley, and corn soared as traders assessed that the food shortage will become real in a very short period of time. Benchmark wheat prices in Chicago hit a record high of $13.60 a bushel this month from an average of $5.50 a bushel over the past 5 years. And it seems like the most vulnerable will suffer the most. Africa and Asia are among the most reliant on Ukraine's grain, with Egypt and Indonesia being the top 2 importers. The UN Food and Agriculture Organization estimates that up to 13 million more people worldwide may be pushed into food insecurity because of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. To alleviate the problem, the US and Canada are mulling ways to expand their production, and hopes are high in India too, as the world's biggest wheat provider is expected to see a record harvest this year. Food security has risen as an important issue in South Korea as well, as it is less than 50% self-sufficient when it comes to grains. President-elect Yoon Sang-yeol's transition team are also discussing measures to secure a stable food supply. Experts say the best option would be to diversify import channels.
Well, the problem is Korea is not a very good terrain to mass-produce grains. Because Korea has too much mountainous ranges, I think a better move would be try to find some countries to form a secure supply chain with.
Also, because grains are essential as feedstock, South Korea is expected to see a surge in the price of meat in the near future. Kim Sung-min, Arirang News.
Back here in Indonesia, there's a special green project carried out in Chungju. The city seeks to turn biomethane gas from food waste into hydrogen fuel that can be used to charge vehicles. For details, let's turn to our Lee Si-hoo.
On Wednesday, the city of Chungju in Chungcheongbuk-do province celebrated the completion of South Korea's first green hydrogen refueling station that uses biogas. Chungcheongbuk-do province and the city of Chungju, as well as the Institute for Advanced Engineering, took part in the project that took around 3 years to complete. The station produces hydrogen using biogas emitted from food waste collected at Chungju City's Food Bioenergy Center. The food waste goes through filters and a fermentation process before turning into biomethane gas. It is then mixed with water and hydrogen is extracted from the mixture. The hydrogen is then purified so it can be used as fuel for hydrogen cars. This project allows around 500 kilograms of hydrogen to be produced per day at a station for the first time in Korea. That's enough hydrogen to fill about 100 hydrogen vehicles. Seawater, wind, and solar energy found in coastal and offshore environments are used to produce hydrogen. But as Chungcheongbuk-do is a landlocked province, it's difficult for petrochemical complexes or LNG supply bases to be built. Previously, natural gas-based hydrogen had to be produced in places like Daesan, Yeosu, or Ulsan and was transported to Chungju, which was expensive.
Natural gas-based hydrogen can be produced only in certain regions, but food waste can be collected anywhere, therefore making it possible to produce hydrogen regardless of location.
The station will serve as what's called a mother station that will charge both hydrogen cars and tube trailers that can carry hydrogen fuel to other charging stations.
It's about 27% cheaper to create hydrogen from biogas compared to creating it from natural gas. We hope that our method of extracting hydrogen serves as a model for similar projects around the country. We also hope that the citizens can drive hydrogen cars at a lesser cost.
The fact that the price of hydrogen is not affected by international oil prices will enable stable supply and demand and without price fluctuations.
Because this is eco-friendly, as a driver, I feel like I'm making an environmental contribution. It's also convenient how it can be charged in a short amount of time.
The province will continue to engage in more eco-friendly projects to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050, according to its governor. Lee Si-hoo, Arirang News.
Lingering showers are set to remain overnight nationwide. The amount of rain won't be too much, with about 5 millimeters for inland regions, and that includes the capital area. Heavier showers are expected for eastern Gangwon-do province and Jeju Island, with about 5 to 20 millimeters in the forecast. After the rain tapers off, morning conditions will get much chillier until the weekend. By Saturday, lows in the capital will plummet to 2 degrees Celsius. Temperatures will feel colder than the actual readings due to the wind chills. Also, a drop in the morning lows will create big contrast in temperatures of at least 10 degrees or more. Aside from the capital region and Daejeon, most regions will have a rainy morning. Seoul will start off at 7 degrees Celsius. Rain will ease off by the daytime, but more clouds will build up. Seoul and Daegu will get up to 14 degrees. Gwangju 16 and Gyeongju will reach 11 degrees. After the rain, the capital region will see plenty of sunshine. Air quality will stand in the normal to good category for most regions. That's all for now, and here are the weather conditions around the world.
It's time to wrap things up. As always, thank you for staying with us.